So today with us, we have Justin Knowles from it's California Farm Garden, correct? Is that the name?
Farm and Garden, yeah.
Farm and Garden.
California Farm and Garden, that's it.
Okay, cool. And you are going to talk to us about what you do and the mission of your company. And then I have some other questions to ask you too. But if you just want to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, what you do in your day to day.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. My name is Justin Knowles, and I work as a maintenance assistant at California Farm and Garden. And I grew up in the Northeast, grew up in Connecticut, I grew up in Maine, and have family in New York City. So that to me, that region is home. And there's a whole lot of agricultural history in that area that I was introduced to at a young age, but didn't really pursue until I was in college. And kind of led me to where I am today. And I think we'll get more into that. But yeah, should I just get started then on what the company does?
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. So California Farm and Garden is a company that designs, installs, and maintains edible organic gardens. In short, it's edible landscaping. So it's a niche within landscaping, and that's kind of the business model approach to it. And I work on the maintenance side of things. Every now and then I'll help out the install team, and there's a few very talented members of our team that design these gardens. And we design them for families, we design them for homes, for businesses, for schools, and we operate throughout San Diego County and parts of Orange County as well. We also work directly with restaurants, which is really fun. And there's a few farms within the company that I sometimes will work at as well. But typically I go from clients' houses, take care of their home gardens. And one of our goals within the company is to empower and educate people to grow their own food. So best case scenario, actually, we work with them to design, install, maintain for a couple seasons, give them some experience and pointers along the way. And then eventually they say, thank you for your services. We'll take it from here. And which is great, because then that frees us up to help out a new client and kind of continue fulfilling that mission. And the mission is using organic methods, local sources, and a crew with unsurpassed expertise to design, install, and maintain edible landscaping in urban environments. We provide local, sustainable food opportunities to our clients while educating the public on how these efforts influence global regeneration and sustainability. So that's direct from the website, and that's it.
Nice. So what is a day like on the job for you?
As a maintenance assistant, a typical day begins early, around 6 or 7 in the morning, and we load up the truck. We get all our supplies we need for the day. On average, we're seeing 2 clients a day. There's days where we see 1, there's days where we see 3, but for the most part, we're going to see 1 to 3 a day. And we'll get, like I said, we'll get all our supplies. What that includes is fertilizers, organic amendments, insecticides, pesticides. We also get any hard tools we need, any waste materials that we're gonna need to haul stuff out of there, and then we'll bring new plants with us, and we'll load that up, drive out to wherever our clients are. Some are in Chula Vista, some are all the way up in North County or Oceanside, and some as far east as Jamul or La Mesa. So we really are all over the county. And after we leave the site, we'll arrive, or after we leave the office, we arrive on site. We get directly to work in the garden, and that's kind of when the fun begins. We start it's kind of a joke within the company. We put on our investigator hat when we show up as a maintenance assistant, and we're like, okay, what's going on in this garden? What needs to be taken care of right away? What does the client need? What have they asked of us? What are their needs? And we kind of work within those parameters. And some clients are weekly, very few are weekly. We have some that are twice a month, some that are, most of our clients are monthly, and some that are quarterly or biannually. So depending on those needs, we'll take care of the garden, whether or not we'll take care of the garden kind of with that in mind, like, oh, we'll be here for about in a month. So what can we do to set them up for success between now and our next visit? And with shorter turnaround clients, we're able to be more involved in that garden, and those ones allow us a little more flexibility in terms of what we can do. But when we see them less frequently, we really have to do a lot of what we would call the heavy lifting. And then after the visit's over, we pack up, go to the next spot, and then kind of wrap it up for the day. And then after the visit, we email our clients, respond to them by saying, hey, here's what happened today. Here's some things you could do in the meantime, and we'll see you at our next visit, whenever that is. And then we go, we're back at the office unloading the truck, and we're done around 3:00. And that's a typical day. So it's interesting in the way that you see a lot of the county. You work with a variety of clients with different properties, different intentions for growing their own food. We get a range of clients that really want to be in the soil with us. There's a few that will actually work with us, which is exciting, and some that are really grateful to have their food harvested and grown in their backyard, but don't typically put their hands in the soil too often. And that's what we're here for, to make it easier for them.
Nice. And that was a student question. A student had emailed me to ask you about what percentage of your clients want to work with you in the garden themselves, and like what percentage are pretty hands off, if you have an estimate.
Yeah, if I would estimate, I would say somewhere between 25 to 33% of our clients are in the garden with us, heavily involved. There's probably 50% of the clients that's a mixed bag, like depending on what's going on in their life, they can be out in the garden with us, or if they're traveling, they're not there. So we do the heavy lifting for them during those times. And then when they are, then whatever remaining percentage of that is, I think it's 50-30. So like the remaining 20%, about that, they're kind of hands off. And I forgot to mention too, we not only do organic gardens, we also do orchards. So
Nice.
we're growing fruit trees as well, everything from avocados to loquats, any type of citrus to stone fruits as well. And those are really fun for clients to harvest and be a part of that process. But pretty much the rest of it, it's kind of hard to conceptualize if you're not doing it every day and don't have the right fertilizers for it. So very few clients are in the orchards doing that type of work. But in the garden, especially around this time of year when tomatoes are going in and peppers and eggplants, people are most excited right now to get involved and get ready for it.
Awesome. What is your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job is actually working in the soil. There's something I learned along the way in before I worked with this company, a thing called the ribbon test with soil, where you can pick up a handful of it, give it a squeeze, and you can feel its texture, its composition, its soil moisture, its moisture retention, all these factors that indicate what will be healthy for the plants to grow in. And it's very dynamic. It's a wide range, and it depends really on all of the factors of weather, location, frequency of watering, the type of plants that are in there, what was in there the year before, and kind of how the soil has been cared for over time. But there's something really, really fun about getting a handful of just light, airy, but also very nutrient-rich soil. And that alone is one of my favorite parts to know, okay, this soil is really good. This garden will be very productive for us because the soil has a great foundation. Now we just need to put the other pieces together so that way we can produce a lot of food and have a happy client and have a happy community and all the other good things. So starting with the soil, that's my favorite part. And then when the soil is not necessarily in that optimal range, it's exciting to think about, okay, what can we do? What materials do we have? What time do we have in what sort of approach are we going to do to make the soil as productive as possible so that we can have the most food possible, and so that we can cook with it and share it and celebrate it. So starting there is my favorite part of it. I also really appreciate dealing with the variety of geographic factors we have in San Diego County. I think some people, I'm not even, I mean, some people think it's just one type of climate, but there's a lot of microclimates within our county because there's different elevations, there's different orientations based on where you are with the coast or where you are in the mountains, or how that relates to our work is really exciting. And we'll look at a space that may be shady and say, oh, well, we can't really do this here because that's a sun-loving plant. So what can we do? Well, we can give them a shade-loving plant, and that can be really bountiful for them. And kind of using those factors and asking yourselves those questions along the way are really fun to me as well. And when it comes through and you have thought through those questions and you feel like you have a good answer, and then months later you see that decision come a long way and turns out to be right, it's awesome. And then there's other times where, oh, should have done it this way, that wasn't the best way, and then you just kind of learn from that, and you kind of take note of it and try again next time. And that's what's great about growing food. The other thing I really love about not only what I do, but I love who I do it with. It's a great group of people. Every experience I've ever had growing food is really honest, hardworking people, very, very smart people. And they're willing to share. They have this great spirit of, yeah, it's hard work, but we're also going to smile and laugh along the way. And, we're going to, we're doing something fun here, because when people are growing food, most often they have an appreciation for food. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when we're, shoveling soil or lifting waste, buckets, like the kind of the more laborious stuff, we're talking about fun stuff like, oh, this is a beautiful plant, and like the colors on it or the insects on it are really cool, and there's inspiration there. Or we're talking about cooking and how we, go from being in the garden to being in the kitchen and then sharing meals that we've made. It's really special. So I really love that about not only this company, but the kind of the overall field of growing food. Mm-hmm. And that's not everyone, but in my experience, I've met a lot of people who grow food that appreciate it and love to cook it and love to share it, and have inspiration from so many different sources, and sharing that inspiration and that knowledge is old as time, really. So it's very, very cool in that way. And yeah, it's just like being a part of a dynamic team right now with this company is really special. Everyone has their own skill set, their own knowledge base that adds an element to why we're successful. We have one person who's born and raised in San Diego and is a encyclopedia of native plants. It is amazing. And he's my go-to guy if I'm ever stumped. So that's really cool. And then we have someone who used to build chicken coops and teach people how to raise chickens, and kind of bring in that element of growing food and organic food. And there's all different varieties of examples like that. So it's fun. It's a good team.
Nice. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that sometimes you plant things and you get to see the success, and sometimes you plant things and you have to change what you have planted there. I think that especially with people who are just starting out growing things, there's a big misconception of failure, and that if they plant a pepper and it dies, then they did something wrong. And sometimes it's where you planted it. Sometimes it's the pepper plant itself. Sometimes maybe it is something you did wrong, but even the most seasoned and expert plant growers kill things all the time. And that's, a normal part of it. So it's nice to hear that other people professionally, plant something somewhere and realize that it wasn't maybe the best space for it. And It's always a big experiment. And as you mentioned, that once you do all of the hard labor of moving soil, breaking ground, planting things, then you really get to reap those benefits of harvesting your food. But that you have to do that hard work first. And it does kind of garner a new appreciation for where our food comes from. Okay, so what was your career path to get to where you are now with California Farm and Garden?
Yeah, for sure. I um, always had a passion for food. I want to give credit to my family. My mom is a big cook, and a family of six in my immediate family, and growing up near cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff. Feeding the family was always a major a part of any holiday, any family get together. So that was kind of where it all started. That was my initial understanding of food, but then it just led to another question of, okay, this is how we share food and how we get together as a family, but like what's happening in the kitchen? And I asked what was happening in the kitchen. I was lucky to have a brother who was a chef, and he's taught me a lot of things about how to prepare food and how to appreciate food. And then it led to another question of, okay, where is this coming from? Okay, it's coming from the soil. And it all kind of worked out timing wise, where that appreciation was building as I was going through school. And I went to the University of Oregon, and I didn't necessarily know how to navigate through the university, and didn't really know what career I wanted at that time. Luckily, there was a few very inspired professors and a few very exciting programs that I thought were really worth exploring. And I just kind of dove into those. And again, like one question led to another, and I kept meeting really good people, and it just solidified that working with food, working with soil, working with those types of people is where I want to continue. That's where I am learning the most, and I am enjoying it the most. And so that's how it kind of all started. But to be more specific, at the University of Oregon, there was this program called the Urban Farm, where the school was really lucky to have 40 acres devoted to organic gardening, or organic farming rather. And there was no livestock, but it was really well ingrained with the community. And there's a local coffee roaster that would give us their leftover beans, and we'd add that to our compost. And those are some initial relationships I saw within the community that were really, really powerful, really special, and brought people together. And I saw that firsthand, and that inspired me to say, okay, let's keep doing this. And it led to the next opportunity for me, which was the ability to work with a nonprofit in the area called the School Garden Project of Lane County. And that was an in-school and after-school education program for K through 5. So I was lucky enough to work in the garden directly with K through 5 students in school, and taught them basic gardening tips, basic relation to where their food comes from, under the framework of awareness to action. Like, oh, this is where the food comes from. Okay, this is why we have to take care of the garden, and this is why a garden is important. And it turned into a classroom, and it was really exciting, and that was really beneficial. But that was while I was in school, so I had to figure out kind of how to take that to the next level. And I kind of took a couple of turns along the way to get to where I am. Right after college, I worked at a real estate law firm, and that was away from gardening and farming and really soil. But I kind of justified it in my mind as, oh, this is real estate law. We're still working with the land. It's just a different perspective on it. So from there, I was just learning as much as I could, and never really lost a passion for growing food and community around food. But ultimately, after 2 years, I decided I need to get back into the soil. I need to figure out how to get my hands dirty again. So I transitioned into a company called Square Roots Urban Growers, and they grow food hydroponically in New York City, and they deliver it to markets in New York City. And it's tech-enabled farming, and it is soilless farming, but it's local food. And I was very inspired on that. And in an urban environment, any type of local food I think is worth exploring. So I gave that a try, so to speak. Worked there, and ultimately decided that the location, and although the company's mission I aligned with, the company's location and kind of my passion for working with the soil um, wasn't completely aligned. So I kind of took another turn and had the passion to live in San Diego, and found a job in hospitality, which was way far from anything related to the to soil. And I learned a lot about business there, and relationships, and client relationships, and just kind of adapting to people's needs. But ultimately knew that I wanted to get back to working with the soil. So um, it worked out perfectly that I was able to transition from that company to California Farm and Garden, and been there since August of last year.
Nice.
So yeah, it's kind of the path.
Nice. No, it's nice for everyone to hear that overall, most people don't go to school for something and then get a career and stay with that forever. And so it's never too late to go back to what your interests were, or find new interests and start new careers. And I think that's really important for people to know. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome.
What has been your biggest accomplishment in your career? So it could be with California Farm and Garden, or any other career that you've had.
Yeah. Well, I do believe that although my path has taken a few turns, that I've never lost the passion for working with food communities. So I think to some degree, it's all serving towards the ultimate accomplishment, which I think is still yet to come. But the accomplishments thus far, I think, is a hard question, because I'm still really young and have worked with a number of companies, and haven't really pulled up anything where I could be like, yeah, that's an accomplishment. But I feel like I'm just getting started now with the company that I align with, and the mission that I align with, and really like in a place that I align with, and pulling all those pieces together. So I think in that sense, that might be the biggest accomplishment, that I had taken a few tries to learn what I didn't want to do as much as what I did want to do.
Mhm.
And now that those pieces of the puzzle are together, now it's just starting. And that is an accomplishment in itself. And I think the other thing that is an accomplishment that kind of relates to what I just said, is that ultimately is just knowing my passion and staying true to it, and knowing that, okay, like it's not every job is going to be perfect, but it's going to teach you something along the way, and serve you towards that ultimate goal. And with multiple companies experience, you're exposed to a lot of different types of people, different types of ways that business works, and I think that is beneficial in so many ways. And there's client skills that I learned in the hospitality business that I'm applying as a gardener, and there are things I learned as an environmental educator, working with elementary students, that I'm working with or that I'm using now with clients, because it's also kind of an education approach to the client world. So I think it's just kind of a combination of those things. Specifically with California Farm and Garden, there's been a few install projects where we're removing a tree to plant something, or replacing that. And when you're working on removing a tree for half a day's work, maybe a full day's work, like, it doesn't look like you got a lot done, but getting a tree out is hard work, and that alone is an accomplishment. So there's little things like that along the way that have been rewarding, and that's one of the benefits of edible landscaping is that, yeah, like it may not seem like an accomplishment, but it really is. Like every step along the way is an accomplishment. Everything from like digging a trench to lay an irrigation line, or finishing soil day in a day in one day opposed to two. Like those little things make a huge difference in the long term. And then kind of on the other side of, or really more importantly on the maintenance side of things for me, transitioning gardens from winter gardens to summer gardens, it's a lot of work the way we do it. We have we pull everything out, we add organic amendments, we turn the soil, we replant, and then we reset the irrigation line, and there's a lot of steps along the way. That's as fast as I could say it, but it takes time, especially if you have, 4 raised beds that you're doing and 2 in-ground beds, and they're each, anywhere from 6 to 10 foot long. So it's kind of those moments where it's like, wow, this is going to be a lot of work today. Like, I hope we can get it done. And then when you get it done, you're like, wow, that's a good accomplishment. I can sleep. I'm going to sleep well tonight, and I'll be hungry. It's kind of that feeling of, oh, I've earned it,
Yeah. You had a good point too, that sometimes the plants are the easy part of our job, and it's the people that are the harder
Mm-hmm.
part. So they're more complicated. So, and yeah, that you said, really any job that you have, even if it's not in the horticulture industry, you will learn valuable skills there that can be applied in any other job, especially communication skills. Those are so important.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we have some late joiners. What
Welcome.
We'll say for everyone who's joining us a little bit late, this is Justin Knowles, and he's from California Farm and Garden. He's just telling us what he's been up to. What is your biggest challenge in your career?
Specifically with the role I'm in as a maintenance assistant in California Farm and Garden, the biggest challenge is the complications that come from different client needs. And because we're on certain terms with the client, say the client can only afford this much time on site in this much materials, that can get complicated pretty quickly. That's one example of it, of like, okay, we only have 2 hours to get all this work done, and you got to move quickly. You got to unload the truck, get everything set up, do the work, clean it up, and get out of there in this time frame. And it's kind of this balance of quality over quantity, and I think that balance comes in a lot of different businesses, and it comes into play with a lot of different kind of horticultural things as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's doable. That's the thing, is it's doable, and our company's really understanding, and we're a unit, and we'll always, if anything needs explanation, we'll always go kind of from a team approach to address the client, say, hey, this is what happened. If we don't get it done, because we essentially are a customer service type of business, we'll offer alternatives. Be like, hey, we didn't get it done today, but we can be back this day to finish it. Or if possible, before it gets to that point, we'd actually have the discussion internally with the team to be like, hey, it's easier now if we just spend an extra 30 minutes to get it done. That way we don't have to do another visit here or charge a client extra or lose our time on site for another client, so there's some challenges in that way of just, getting things done within a certain time frame. And that's a complication of seeing 2, maybe 3 clients a day all over the county. If traffic slows you down, if you got a supply or some material at the warehouse, like those
Yeah.
things happen, and you do your best to be prepared so you don't, you minimize those mistakes, and when they do come up, you just fix them, get them done, and uh, move on. It happens where the day goes perfectly and you get all the work done, and you're on time and everything, and the clients are happy, and that's great. But there are days where the dog chewed the irrigation line and you didn't have a supply, so you got to go drive an hour to go get the right supply, and it throws off the rest of the day. And those sort of challenges happen. And I think, kind of to take a step back away from California Farm and Garden, the biggest challenge is kind of like I said earlier in relation to the accomplishment of just like knowing what pieces of what pieces are important to you, and putting them all together, like where you live, what you do, who you work with, those types of things. They're all valuable to people in different ways, and kind of knowing them and making it happen, it's challenging. So I've had challenges with that, but I've also had some successes with that, and it's kind of a never-ending process, really.
Nice. I have a student question.
Yeah.
So when you are going to go to a client's house to do like install some raised beds, do you have an idea of what their space looks like ahead of time, or are you showing up and like are the clients sending you photos and describing their space, or are you kind of just showing up? Or I guess the student is wondering how prepared you are before you get to the site.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in kind of best case scenario, the client would reach out to us and say, "Hey, I want to put in a farm," and we'll say, "Okay, do you have a design? Do you need us to do a design?" And then that's kind of step one. If they have a design, then which oftentimes they don't,
Mhm.
we'll use that and then go out on site and start visualizing and piecing the puzzles together. And questions that we ask ourselves all the time is like, okay, so where do we have to park, and how do we get supplies from where we park to the site? It's a major challenge, and depending on where people's backyards are, if it's on a hill, if it's if they have a long driveway, or if they have gated community access, there's all these factors that come into play. But that's where the design team kind of comes involved or gets involved. It's like they'll figure out that part of the process. But the actual on-site work, it starts usually with a walkthrough with the client, discussing what their budget is, what they're looking for, what their intentions are. We have a client that's doing a market garden who's going to be growing food to be selling at a market. We have many clients that just grow it for their family, and they just eat it in their kitchen. So that's kind of the next phase of the process, to think about what is the purpose of this, and then what scale can they do, what can they afford. And we have a really great design team, and they'll put together some really beautiful gardens. And then when it gets down to it, our install team will build the beds at our office, and then we'll transport the beds to the site. And then our install team will, put together the irrigation lines. They'll lay down any type of foundation, any type of ground cover, anything from native to edible plants, any type of trees. They'll set it up, and that's really hard work. It really is hard work. But it's awesome when it comes together, because you pretty much are like a team of artists, and you go to the space where it's not producing any food, and by the end of it, it's a beautiful garden that you just want to walk through and spend time in, and grow food in. So the process is, like we'll do the design by communicating with the client, doing a walkthrough. We will then get the approval, start building at the office, transport all of our supplies and materials, and build. Once the raised beds are built at the office, everything else is done on site. which I think answers the question. And then after that, kind of the third part of the business, the third branch of it is, okay, now that this garden's installed and functional, we also have a team that can maintain it and teach you how to continue growing food. So that's kind of the business plan, or the business model. And it's also like really helpful for someone who's, looking to grow their own food for themselves, or for their family, for their neighborhood, whatever it is, because it's a lot. It's a lot to learn, and it's a lot to maintain. And having kind of the expertise to be like, hey, the irrigation would work better if it's, like this, opposed to, just either underwatering it or overwatering it. And then, yeah.
Nice. Is it challenging for you to manage expectations sometimes for clients who maybe have a certain financial limit, but want maybe you to accomplish some things that don't fit within those limitations? So, for example, if they want an entire orchard or farm, but the funding won't quite cover that, do you find that that is a challenging part of your job?
Yeah, absolutely. And personally, because I'm on the maintenance side, I am more in the soil once those conversations are had. So I can't comment too much on them,
Okay.
because another person on our team that kind of covers the terms and sets those expectations. And then it's more my job to meet those expectations, or say, hey, these expectations are unreasonable. We have to adjust them. Whether it's like over reasonable or under reasonable, that's kind of what I'll see. But ultimately, because I'm kind of a boots on the ground position, I'll get most client interaction. Whether I'm on the phone with them saying, hey, I'll be there in a little while. Is there anything specific about today's visit you want me to say or to take care of? Or, or if when I email them after. So I'm getting a lot of client contact. And whether or not the client is involved in the garden, a lot of times they'll come out and say hi and ask questions and just, collect the harvest, whatever it is. So those are the times where they'll say, hey, like, why does my orange tree have yellow leaves? Or why is there curl on my peach leaf? And why are these certain things happening that look ugly? Those are the conversations that are typically hard to have, because people do there are people that have certain I would say romantic ideas about growing food, that it's like the prettiest thing ever, but in fact no, it's really dynamic. And to have healthy, productive food growing spaces, it's not always the most beautiful, because it's growing and there's things growing on top of each other. And particularly tomatoes, they grow wild, they're so big and they really grow fast. So it may not it may be concerning for someone to look at something that's not as aesthetically pleasing, but in fact they're getting like the best tasting tomatoes ever. So you kind of have to balance those expectations of like what it looks like versus what's being produced, especially with orchards. Trees are really difficult in that way, because they could look a certain way but produce the best fruit you ever had, or they don't necessarily look great, or they look great but the fruit's not there, and there's an inconsistency. So having conversations like that are difficult, and everyone's understanding of growing food is different. So again, kind of back to client communications and communication skills, you just have to understand how people see it and different ways to send a message that people will understand. And there are times, unfortunately, where we've had kind of the same conversation over and over again with certain people, and there's only so many ways you could say the same thing. And that's just business. It's people. It happens. And then we have some really cool clients as well that are just like, whatever, like doesn't have to be perfect as long as it produces, we're happy with it. But our company is in a unique position compared to other, I actually don't know any other edible land. Actually I do, there's a few, but when you think of landscaping, you think aesthetics only. People want it to be beautiful. And when they hire someone like our team, they think it's going to be the most beautiful space, but they're also going to get food, which is fair. That's what we're here for. But our priority is to produce food. Our secondary priority is aesthetic. So I guess that's another challenge that I should have mentioned, is like balancing those two is really, really challenging. We want to produce the most food possible, the healthiest food possible, the most nutrient rich possible food. And then after that, take care of aesthetics. So between those two things that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a part of my job too, is I get a lot of people who will ask me, what's wrong with their plant, and they have one yellow leaf or a little brown tip, and it's probably nothing, just
Mm-hmm.
like, do I have to cut the leaf off? If you want, but you don't need to. And if you walk out in nature, no plant has perfectly green leaves all the time. It's normal for
Mm-hmm.
the healthiest plant to shed old leaves. So
Right.
people are, especially people who are newly interested in plants, are seeing Pinterest plants or Instagram plants that look perfectly beautiful all the time, and that's not real life. Um, so what has been a favorite class of yours that you've taken related to horticulture? So a class or a workshop. Do you have any favorites?
Yeah, absolutely. It was back at the University of Oregon when I was a part of the urban farm program. It was a year long, or an academic year, so fall, winter, spring, where I was on the farm almost every day and just learned right there. It was kind of like it was my introduction to growing food, and it was hands-on. It wasn't classroom based at all. We did not once sit in a classroom. And it was in Oregon, so it rained, and we worked in the rain, and I learned everything from in-ground beds to raised beds to orchard care, compost care, greenhouse care, and got to see the transition from season to season. So that was my favorite one, and not only because the work itself was really interesting for me, and was also it was like when you're in a lecture, or if you're in a classroom and you're having like discussions and you write papers and learning in that kind of traditional format, it's good. You can learn a lot that way, but I love to learn with my hands and love to learn by doing, and visually too. So I could ask someone, say, hey, how do you do this? They show me, I do it, and then as I'm practicing it, I learn something, and then someone asks me and I share that, and it's just this cool kind of chain of knowledge that's shared orally. So that was an amazing class, and it really set up a foundation of my career, and a foundation to one of my passions in life. And I got to give credit to the professor as well. He was the program director, and was he was very real. He was like, it's hard work. It's not as pretty as it looks. And which is great, because kind of when I was in the early phases of learning, it was like, yeah, I'm in it because it sounds romantic and beautiful, but in fact, like, no, it's dirty and smelly, and it's fun, but get as dirty as you want working in the soil, but clean up and have a great meal. And that was kind of my first experience with that kind of process, and I got to see the process from my friends who did work in the summer. Like they were there in the spring and summer, and they planted. So it felt cool that I was able to like harvest the same plants that they put in the ground, and then work in that space for an entire year and kind of pass it off to the next round of friends. Cause it was an exciting class that a lot of people wanted to get in, and I felt lucky I was able to do it. So it was great. That was a good one.
Awesome. Oh, another question. So what are your favorite things to plant? So either at home or for clients?
Well, it's a hard one. There's so many good ones. To plant or to harvest? Because
You can answer both questions.
yeah, I think harvesting like blueberries and strawberries is awesome. Any type of fruit, really, like uh, oranges, like when you get it that fresh and you're able to harvest it, there's like the juice content, the sugar flavor is unbeatable. You can't get that in a store. So that to me is really exciting. So I think to a degree, planting those types of things is really fun because it's something to look forward to. Like any plant, actually, you have to look forward to. Um, Planting tomatoes is fun because they taste good, but I know they're a lot of work, so there's like kind of a hesitancy to that. But I really do like to what do I like to plant. Oh, I like to plant all of it. Um, Carrots are kind of fun to plant. They're a little more long term, so you kind of have to wait on them, and thinning them isn't always the most fun. But when you pull out a good carrot, it's worth it. Um, Leafy greens, I think, are anything from like kale to lettuce or spinach. I feel like I've planted so many of those that I've kind of lost the appeal on those. Love to plant flowers. I think those really beautiful. Make a space beautiful and add an element of aesthetic. An aesthetic element, and it also brings in pollinators as well. So um, if I had to say one, I would say flowers. I think that was an interview question too, and I think I said flowers. So yeah, now that I'm thinking about it.
Nice. What has been your favorite project that you've worked on for one of your clients?
Yeah, right when I started, our company was in the middle of a massive install. There's 8 raised beds that were 3 feet tall, which are big beds. Um, and I think our largest one was like 4 by 10 or something, like a big bed. And that was kind of the center bed. And as the garden shape was this half moon, and as it got closer to the edges, it like was incrementally getting smaller.
Wow.
So in the space itself it was a beautiful home, and felt really lucky to work there. But the garden had become a priority for them, so they gave us a lot of creativity, and our design team did a great job, and our install team, which I was lucky to be a part of at that time. uh, it was August, so it was brutally hot, but it was really fun because we just saw the potential from those really hot days. We just saw the potential of this space, and it was my introduction to the installation process for our company. And I got to see everything from the irrigation line going in to laying down the desert gold, which is like a kind of, it's exactly what it sounds like a dusty. It's all over San Diego. I'm sure you've all seen it, but it's like this like dusty, rocky soil, not even soil, just like ground cover. And then seeing that just transform into this incredible space. And at the end of it, taking a step back and saying like, whoa, we just did that in a week. That happened like pretty fast. But we installed a grape trellis, and just kind of the whole installation project was really fun. And then because they were a new client and I was part of the maintenance team that was also involved on the install, I was fortunate enough to be one of the first, and still to this day, one of the most regular maintenance assistants that has gone to that client. And it's kind of part of the approach is that within our maintenance team, we'll go to different clients every now and then, but we'll have a few that we go to, so that way we have a full understanding of what's going on there, get a little bit of ownership, and can just dial it in to just really dial in that garden. And I was fortunate that was the garden that I've been a regular at, and that project has been awesome. was a part of the install, part of the fall transition, part of the spring transition that I just finished last week, and just put in watermelon and squash and tomatoes and all these things that I'm looking forward to. So I'm going to see that place transform again. So that particular one is awesome, not only because aesthetically it is beautiful, but also because it's so productive. There's so much work to do that every time I'm at that garden, I'm like, oh, I wish I had like another hour just to finish this so it would look like extra perfect. But you take a step back and you're like, wow, it looks so good. I can go home. We're good.
Nice. Paula has a question for you. She wrote in the chat. Do you consciously use companion plants to attract pollinators as well as plants to pull non-beneficials away from the intended harvest? So kind of like a trap plant.
Not so much on the trap, but definitely companion plant. We're definitely looking at what plants work well together and what don't. I haven't quite memorized it. I'm not going to lie. There's members on our team that are like, they've been doing this longer and they've got it way dialed in. And like I said, one of them is like an encyclopedia. So he's kind of my go-to for that type of technical question. But still, like, yeah, we're definitely putting in companion plants. The trapping, that's a great question. I haven't practiced that technique. I'm sure there is one. But we are doing some interesting stuff like preventative pesticide use. There's an amendment called crab meal, and there's a certain biological function where if you're familiar with root knot nematode, that get into tomato roots, that really, really stunt these plants. Like they don't fruit as well, and they just don't look as good. And then at the end, there's nothing you can do because they've already kind of been suffocated. So then at the end of the season, you pull them out, and tomato roots should be long. They should be long and fairly regular, whereas these are like choked up, crumbled, and short. So to prevent that, we're actually using crab meal in it, and there's a biological function where if we put crab meal in beforehand, it'll attract some organism that actually eats the root, that eats root knot nematode. So that's happening subsoil surface level. And I think that's a really cool part of the process that we're exploring and we're seeing improvement on.
Awesome. Another question we have, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to work in your field?
My advice would be to start with a learning mentality. I feel like I've been able to maintain that, and it's helped me a lot. And like I said earlier on, I'm young and feel like I'm just getting started, and still there's so much to learn. Every time I work with someone new in the field, anytime I work with someone new in the farming world, they have a level of expertise that I'm always blown away with. I want to learn from them, and kind of sharing that knowledge is one of the best parts of it. So I think starting with a learning mentality, know that there's ancient knowledge when it comes to growing food, and there's so many different ways to do it, and there's no one size fits all solution. It's really a dynamic process, and it's a rewarding process that takes time, patience, and it takes a lot of love and a lot of passion. Kind of knowing those things are important going into it, but it's easier said than done. So you kind of have to go through a few growing seasons to really learn the growing cycles, learn that like, on March 21st, that's the spring equinox. Like that's a big deal for growing food. Like those sort of rhythms kind of become second nature. And that's a really cool part of the process. But I think, if you're serious about getting into growing food, the best advice that I could give you, I think it's something I wish I had known before really diving deep into it, is to evaluate your passion. So that your passion for growing food, because there are going to be some really challenging moments. There's going to be some really tough projects that just have to get done and no one's going to do them. And if you want to grow food, you got to do them. So you got to ask yourself, where you will and where you won't compromise with relation to that passion, and then commit to it. And just commit to your passion and continue to commit. And like I said earlier, just be ready to learn every day. And it's very, very fulfilling. It's very rewarding in so many ways. So yeah, start with the learning mentality, evaluate your passions, and, commit to them.
Nice. We have another question from Paula. She wants to know if the company activity slows down during winter.
It does tremendously because the plants slow down. We're lucky in San Diego where we can grow food year round, but still there's, you're just not doing as much. Whereas just to clean up things like cucumbers and squash and tomatoes can take a lot of time, let alone doing whatever else you need to do, whether it's liquid fertilizers or granular fertilizers, like that takes time too. So in the wintertime, it slows down a lot because you're really only planting leafy greens, maybe some root crops, radishes, carrots, beets, things like that. And those take time as well. They're slower. You can do sugar snap peas, and those are, if you stay on top of them, pretty regular maintenance it's manageable. Whereas like if you go a month between a garden and you have cucumbers, tomatoes, and squash and peppers, it's going to be messy. It's going to take time to clean up. So it does take a lot more attention in the summer. And in the winter, it's, just kind of skirting greens and thinning carrots. And, there's less daylight hours, and, the UV index is lower and the temperatures are lower. So naturally there's less opportunity to grow stuff. But like I said earlier, we're really lucky in San Diego to be able to grow food year round. So that's actually a really productive time for our orchards, particularly citrus trees. And that's kind of where we spend a lot of our time, because we know come summertime, we'll be taking care of the garden, and that's going to be requiring a lot. So that's kind of how we balance it out. And it's honestly so taxing in the summer that in the winter, it's not bad to get rained out once or twice. Which is rare. It's really rare, but it's kind of like, hey, take it while you can,
Nice. And we have another question as well. Do you double dig, or do some of your clients ask for no-till or more permaculture centered methods?
Yeah, that's a great question. In raised beds, it's pretty tough to do no-till. It's pretty tough to do permaculture, just because you're in a confined space.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in ground, I think you can be a little more methodical about how you do that. And at our farms, we do practice no-till, we do practice permaculture at some of the farms. But with the maintenance clients that I'm seeing more regularly that are more backyard garden style, we are double digging when it comes time for spring and fall transitions. We double dig so we could get, first and foremost, the roots extracted from the soil. We aerate the soil, add organic amendments, and then top it with mulch and fertilizer, and then reset the irrigation line. And that's kind of what the process looks like. But the double digging is mostly for getting the roots out and eliminating root knot nematode, like I talked earlier. You have to double dig to get it out of there, and the amendment we use, the crab meal amendment, does better at a deeper depth.
We do double dig in our raised beds too on campus, and I agree that
cool.
You're not getting the benefits of doing a no-till method in a raised bed in the same way you would in the ground. So it is hard to implement.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions for Justin? You can either type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Go ahead, Madeline. Yeah. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. My question is, to Justin is that I would like to find out what kind of soil is good for the Asian green vegetables plants like bok choy.
So the best soil for Asian vegetables like bok choy.
Yeah. Yeah, we grew a lot of bok choy this winter, a lot of tatsoi, kind of that variety of leafy greens. And the best soil is very similar to the soil you would grow tomatoes with. I don't necessarily know the exact ratios, but you want one that has really good soil composition. So it's well aerated, it retains moisture, it has some mineral content, and there's not too much clay in it or too much sand, but there's like a little bit of both, and those are things to look for. But I don't know specifically if you're looking for like ratios or things like that. I wish I knew better. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot to learn.
For most fruits and vegetables, a loamy soil, and Madeline, we learned about this in LNT 100. A loamy soil is really best for most of them, as Justin described.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of a universal soil for growing food. The loamy stuff. That's a good word. Thanks for bringing that up.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay. Let me see if I think I got to all the student questions. Is there anything else you wanted to add about your work, Justin, or any advice?
Yeah, I think in terms of building a career out of it, the best thing you could do for yourself is to just introduce yourself and start networking. The only jobs I've ever had was through networking. I've had so many, I guess, learning experiences about sending in blind resumes to companies that I really thought were cool and I really thought I had a chance to work at. And I either didn't hear back or I didn't get offered an interview at least. And I think that's a shame because there's, if give me a chance, let me sit down, let's have an interview. But, I imagine an employer, they get many resumes, and sifting through those is challenging. And I'm seeing that now with our company. We have positions moving around, and our people in our company are being hired, and interview process is challenging for small businesses. So I think I've seen kind of both sides of it, and have sympathies for both sides. But I was really lucky to know someone that worked in this company, and kind of gave me a head start in the application process. So in terms of any type of work that you end up doing, but particularly with one like this, where it's a small business, it's service oriented and it's hard work, people are looking for trust, and that comes from networking. So start there, and just stay true to your passion, and enjoy it, learn.
Great. Those are all great points. Well, if any of you come up with some questions after this meeting, you can email them to me, and then I'll follow up with Justin on those. But Justin, thank you so much for coming and talking to us and letting us know all about you and what you do for California Farm and Garden. That's all I have.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was excited to be here, excited to kind of share my experience and some knowledge that I have, and excited that there's learning botanists out there, or learning horticulturists. So it's a great community. I wish you all the best of luck. Holly, thank you for having me, and nice to meet all of you.
Great.
And yeah, and like Holly said, if you have any questions, reach out. I'll be happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a nice day. Thanks.
Bye.